Hi, I'm Tessa Langley, and 6 weeks ago, my world shifted with the quiet slide of a drawer. I was in my small townhouse in Eugene, Oregon, a place that still held echoes of laughter and Sunday mornings. I'm 35 now, and for the past 3 years, I've kept one thing exactly the same, a velvet box in my nightstand. It held the engagement ring Michael and I designed together before he passed. He spent years saving for it. Every detail mattered. It was worth $590,000, but to me, it was priceless. That morning, I reached for it like I always did on hard days. The drawer slid open with that familiar click, but the box was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd moved it. I checked the back, under tissues, an old wristwatch, even behind the nightstand, but something in my chest already knew. It wasn't misplaced. I went downstairs. My mother was at the kitchen island sipping chamomile tea and flipping through a gardening catalog like it was any other Wednesday. Light poured through the window, catching the silver in her hair. "Morning," she said, without even looking up. I kept my voice steady. "Mom, do you know where my ring is? Michael's ring?" She turned a page. "Oh, that? We sold it. Delaney needed time to heal. She's in Bali. You know, spiritual retreat, ocean air, the whole thing. Just like that. No warning, no apology. They sold a ring that held my future in its facets, so my younger sister could find herself on a beach. As if grief wasn't real unless it was dramatic. As if my love, my memories, were just storage clutter. On my bed later, I found a crisp legal envelope. Inside, a signed transfer of ownership, without my consent. But what my parents didn't realize was that Michael left more than a ring behind. He left me the passwords, the trust account, and a private letter stating it was never to be touched without my written approval, and I had a lawyer. Before I get to what happened next, and trust me, it was the last thing they expected, let me ask you this. Have you ever been dismissed by the very people who were supposed to protect you? If you have, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I read every one. This isn't just a story about a ring. It's about reclaiming what's yours, piece by piece. "Oh," Mom said, blinking slowly like I'd asked if we had milk past its expiration. "That? We sold it." The silence between us thickened like fog. "You what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stirred her tea, eyes drifting toward the window. "Delaney needed support for her Bali retreat. Spiritual growth, Tessa. You weren't even wearing the ring anymore." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't just a ring. It was the ring, a symbol of the life I was supposed to have. The future I lost. Dad's voice drifted in from the hallway. "You hadn't touched it in months. We figured you didn't need it anymore." I turned. There he was, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. That familiar look of weary judgment on his face, like I was a burden for grieving too long, for not moving on according to their timeline. "You sold something that wasn't yours," I said, my voice low but steady. Dad shrugged. "Well, technically, no," I cut him off. "That ring was mine. Michael designed it with me. We picked the stone together. He had our initials engraved inside." Mom rolled her eyes. "Tessa, it's not like you're still getting married." She said it like a joke, like Michael had just run late, not like he collapsed in a grocery store parking lot, holding flowers and a bottle of Pinot, trying to surprise me. Not like his last voicemail was him humming our song, saying he'd picked up dinner. "He's dead, not forgotten," I snapped. My voice cracked. Mom sighed like she always did when emotions made things uncomfortable. "Delaney's finding herself. This retreat is life-changing." "Then she should have sold something of hers," I said, almost to myself. "She doesn't have anything like that," Dad muttered. "And you weren't using it." I took a step back. The floor felt uneven. They hadn't just taken a ring. They had taken the last part of him that still felt real. I walked upstairs, each step like a thunderclap. Back in my room, I opened the drawer again. Still empty. But then, folded neatly in the corner, I saw it. The velvet cloth, deep navy, white daisies stitched into the edge. Limp now, with nothing inside. I sat on the floor, pressing my fingers into the threads. Michael said they reminded him of that wild field behind the motel in Idaho, where we first fell asleep watching stars. I stayed there a while, just sitting, listening to nothing, feeling everything. Outside the window, the sky had softened into a pale blue. Thin clouds floated by, drifting like they had nowhere urgent to be. The world kept turning, but something inside me had stopped. My voice came before I even realized I was speaking. Quiet, flat. They didn't just sell a ring, they sold what was left of me. I didn't move for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more, just me. That hollow drawer, and the daisy-stitched cloth that once held the only thing that proved Michael ever asked me to be his wife. By the time Sunday evening crept in, I hadn't stepped out of my room once. I hadn't eaten much either, just a few sips of water, a handful of dry crackers, and whatever silence wouldn't make me sick. My phone stayed off since Friday. I was terrified of it, afraid I'd see a text from Mom telling me to be reasonable. Or worse, one from Delaney, acting oblivious. But eventually, I turned it on. Not because I was ready, but because even hiding can become unbearable. The screen lit up, and the first thing that greeted me made my stomach turn. There she was, Delaney, posing on a glossy yoga deck somewhere in Ubud, Bali. Her hair tied up with a string of marigolds, arms raised in that mock spiritual pose she'd been obsessed with since she was 16 and skipping youth group. The caption read, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey, light and growth." The comments poured in. "She's glowing. Such a brave soul. This is what healing looks like." I stared until my hands started shaking. No tears came. That scared me most, because this wasn't sadness anymore. This was something colder, more final. She was using Michael's ring money to fund influencer enlightenment. She'd been reposted by yoga studios, tagged in wellness brands, even quoted in a lifestyle blog titled "From Pain to Power," as if she were the one crawling through grief. Not once did it mention me. Not one word. While she was meditating by waterfalls, I was sleeping on the floor of my childhood room because my parents gave away the bed I bought after Michael died. Too big for one person, Mom had said. I scrolled further, but my mind was already gone. Back to childhood, to slam doors, to tantrums, and to Mom turning to me, sighing, always saying, "You're the strong one, Tessa. Help me keep the peace." That was the job I never applied for, but somehow got stuck with my entire life. Michael used to say, "You don't always have to be the one holding the house together while it burns." But maybe I didn't hold it well enough, because now they were dancing in the flames, and I was what was left in the smoke. Around 8:30 Sunday night, I finally changed out of the sweatshirt I'd been living in and drove out to the cemetery just outside of Springfield. The wind had picked up, early autumn starting to whisper through the pine trees. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. I walked slowly along the gravel path, hands in my pockets, carrying nothing but my phone and the crushing ache that had pressed into my ribs since Friday. When I reached Michael's headstone, I didn't kneel. I just stood there, staring down at his name etched in granite. "They used your ring, Michael," I whispered. "They sold it so Delaney could quote Buddha from Bali." A gust of wind rustled the brittle leaves around my feet. I could have sworn I felt something in my chest crack, just slightly. Back home, I sat on the living room floor, back pressed against the sofa. I picked up my phone. Her newest post had nearly 2,000 likes, a drone shot over terraced rice fields. Delaney, mid-spin, arms out like she was being lifted by enlightenment. The caption, "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." I didn't think. I typed before shame could reach me. Hope the healing was worth it. I paid for it. And hit send. The comment vanished into the flood of hearts and lotus emojis. 10 minutes later, it was gone. Deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they called it. Not betrayal, not erasure, just drama. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen until the letters swam. Then I scrolled up, Delaney's beaming face staring back, while I sat in the same house where my voice always went quiet. I took a step back. The floor felt uneven. They hadn't just taken a ring. They had taken the last part of him that still felt real. I walked upstairs, each step like a thunderclap. Back in my room, I opened the drawer again. Still empty. But then, folded neatly in the corner, I saw it. The velvet cloth, deep navy, white daisies stitched into the edge. Limp now, with nothing inside. I sat on the floor, pressing my fingers into the threads. Michael said they reminded him of that wild field behind the motel in Idaho, where we first fell asleep watching stars. I stayed there a while, just sitting, listening to nothing, feeling everything. Outside the window, the sky had softened into a pale blue. Thin clouds floated by, drifting like they had nowhere urgent to be. The world kept turning, but something inside me had stopped. My voice came before I even realized I was speaking. Quiet, flat. They didn't just sell a ring, they sold what was left of me. I didn't move for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more, just me. That hollow drawer, and the daisy-stitched cloth that once held the only thing that proved Michael ever asked me to be his wife. By the time Sunday evening crept in, I hadn't stepped out of my room once. I hadn't eaten much either, just a few sips of water, a handful of dry crackers, and whatever silence wouldn't make me sick. My phone stayed off since Friday. I was terrified of it, afraid I'd see a text from Mom telling me to be reasonable. Or worse, one from Delaney, acting oblivious. But eventually, I turned it on. Not because I was ready, but because even hiding can become unbearable. The screen lit up, and the first thing that greeted me made my stomach turn. There she was, Delaney, posing on a glossy yoga deck somewhere in Ubud, Bali. Her hair tied up with a string of marigolds, arms raised in that mock spiritual pose she'd been obsessed with since she was 16 and skipping youth group. The caption read, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey, light and growth." The comments poured in. "She's glowing. Such a brave soul. This is what healing looks like." I stared until my hands started shaking. No tears came. That scared me most, because this wasn't sadness anymore. This was something colder, more final. She was using Michael's ring money to fund influencer enlightenment. She'd been reposted by yoga studios, tagged in wellness brands, even quoted in a lifestyle blog titled "From Pain to Power," as if she were the one crawling through grief. Not once did it mention me. Not one word. While she was meditating by waterfalls, I was sleeping on the floor of my childhood room because my parents gave away the bed I bought after Michael died. Too big for one person, Mom had said. I scrolled further, but my mind was already gone. Back to childhood, to slammed doors, to tantrums, and to Mom turning to me, sighing, always saying, "You're the strong one, Tessa. Help me keep the peace." That was the job I never applied for, but somehow got stuck with my entire life. Michael used to say, "You don't always have to be the one holding the house together while it burns." But maybe I didn't hold it well enough, because now they were dancing in the flames, and I was what was left in the smoke. Around 8:30 Sunday night, I finally changed out of the sweatshirt I'd been living in and drove out to the cemetery just outside of Springfield. The wind had picked up, early autumn starting to whisper through the pine trees. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. I walked slowly along the gravel path, hands in my pockets, carrying nothing but my phone and the crushing ache that had pressed into my ribs since Friday. When I reached Michael's headstone, I didn't kneel. I just stood there, staring down at his name etched in granite. "They used your ring, Michael," I whispered. "They sold it so Delaney could quote Buddha from Bali." A gust of wind rustled the brittle leaves around my feet. I could have sworn I felt something in my chest crack, just slightly. Back home, I sat on the living room floor, back pressed against the sofa. I picked up my phone. Her newest post had nearly 2,000 likes, a drone shot over terraced rice fields. Delaney, mid-spin, arms out like she was being lifted by enlightenment. The caption, "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." I didn't think. I typed before shame could reach me. Hope the healing was worth it. I paid for it. And hit send. The comment vanished into the flood of hearts and lotus emojis. 10 minutes later, it was gone. Deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Mom, let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama. Drama. That's what they called it. Not betrayal, not erasure, just drama. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen until the letters swam. Then I scrolled up, Delaney's beaming face staring back, while I sat in the same house where my voice always went quiet. It cost me so much, but I chose joy. I gave up everything, even objects tied to trauma. You can't move forward dragging symbols of emotional debt. I mean, rings. They're just objects soaked in pain. That was Delaney's closing line. I don't remember hitting pause, just staring at the screen. My own reflection glared back at me in the blackened monitor, like it didn't recognize me anymore. 50,000 listens. 50,000 people had heard my story. Twisted, reshaped, sold off as part of her brand. She turned Michael's ring into a metaphor for emotional debt. My grief, our love, reduced to a soundbite. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just sat there, hands frozen mid-air, then slowly typing. I downloaded the podcast, saved it to the truth folder. Then I opened a blank document and gave it a title, Timeline of Misuse. That night, the file filled steadily. Documented quotes, financials, screenshots. My breathing became the only sound, just me, rain tapping the windows, and betrayal settling into my bones like cold. Around 10 p.m., I grabbed my coat and keys. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I needed to scan a few of Michael's letters, and the cafe on 13th and Alder stayed open late and had a scanner in the corner. I drove through damp streets, windshield wipers ticking slow. The barista didn't ask questions, just handed me a black tea. I slipped into a booth near the back, the seat torn slightly at the edge, and fed the letters in one by one. Michael's handwriting wavered near the end, softer, frailer, but his words hit sharp. I love how you see people, even when they've forgotten how to see you. I pressed my hand against the page. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't it. By the time I got home, it was just past midnight. I changed into an old sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and sat cross-legged on the floor near my desk. In the drawer beside me, folded neatly, was the navy velvet cloth with white daisies in each corner, the one that once held the ring. I took the USB drive with the podcast audio and wrapped it inside the cloth. Some things you don't wrap to protect, you wrap them to remember. I zipped it into my purse and left it there, like an anchor. I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. But something inside had shifted. I wasn't falling apart anymore. I was collecting. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally remembering I'd been right. Friday evening settled over the house like a wet coat, heavy, damp, unwelcome. The gray light outside hadn't changed all afternoon. It felt like time had stopped, or maybe just refused to come near this house. Inside, silence pressed in from every direction. My parents had gone out for dinner, leaving behind the faint trace of my mother's lavender perfume and a sealed container of meatloaf I hadn't touched. I stayed upstairs. Door cracked, laptop shut. My back ached from too many hours curled in front of a screen, but lying down felt like surrender. I needed something. A piece of the past untouched by bitterness. Something that reminded me this house hadn't always felt like a cage. I started digging. At the back of my closet was a cracked plastic bin, yellowed at the edges, the kind that broke if you breathed too hard on it. Inside, fragments of a girl I used to be. Burned CDs labeled in Sharpie, birthday cards in crayon, a photo booth strip from a summer fair, and a small stack of mini DV tapes. I found the old camcorder in the drawer, plugged it in, and slid in the first tape labeled Tessa, 6th birthday. The screen buzzed, then flickered to life. Jittery colors, faint voices, and there I was, standing in a yellow sundress next to a cake lit with 6 dancing candles. I remembered that dress. I'd begged Mom for it because it made me feel like sunshine. Then Delaney entered the frame, already taller, already bold. Without warning, she shoved my face into the cake. The room erupted with laughter. The camera shook. "Delaney, oh my God!" Mom's voice, laughing more than scolding. On the screen, little me wiped frosting from my eyelashes, blinking, looking around. No one moved. The clip ended. The screen went dark. My hand clenched the edge of the desk. I sat still, swallowing the same silence I must have choked on that day. "Maybe this is just how it's always going to be," I whispered. The front door opened downstairs. Keys hit the bowl. Soft murmurs. My mother saying goodnight. But instead of going to bed, she came upstairs. Light footsteps outside my door. Then a knock. Before I could answer, the door opened. No warning. She stood there holding a navy velvet box, worn at the corners. Her eyes never quite met mine. "I found these while cleaning the closet," she said. "Nana promised them to you. Thought, maybe now's a good time." She sat on my bed without asking. Opened the box. If you've ever had to reclaim your voice in a house that never heard you, hit subscribe and stay with me. What happened next changed everything. Inside the box was a pair of pearl drop earrings. Delicate, familiar. For a second, I blinked, uncertain what kind of script we were performing now. "She didn't mean to hurt you, sweetie," my mother, Jean, said gently, smoothing the crease in her slacks. "Delaney just processes things differently. And we thought you'd moved on from all that." All that. Like grief was something you boxed up and shoved under the guest bed. The earrings gleamed in the soft hallway light, pristine and cold. I nearly reached for them. I almost let that fragile thread of sentiment blur the jagged edge of what had been done. I almost said thank you. I almost let her rewrite the moment. But then, a buzz. My phone lit up on the desk. A message from Liana, an old college friend. "Thought you should see this." I tapped the link. An Instagram story. There she was, Delaney again. Cross-legged on a sun-drenched patio somewhere in Bali, a pale smoothie in hand. The filter gave her skin a soft glow. Her voice, syrupy, sweet. "Forgiveness is so powerful," she said into the camera. "Even when people lash out, I know it's just their pain talking. I rise above." I stared at the screen. Breath stalled in my throat. It was me, that comment. The velvet cloth, the ring, the earrings, every ounce of restraint I had shown, now twisted into ammo for her performance, repackaged as divine patience. The humiliation surged like heat up my neck, a slap I should have known was coming. Jean left not long after. "Try and get some rest," she said softly. I nodded, didn't speak. The door clicked shut behind her. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed, but the quiet wasn't quiet anymore. I opened my laptop. The folder marked Truth waited like a held breath. I added the screenshot of Delaney's story, then reached into a file for the inheritance letter. Nana's handwriting. Unmistakable. My name, written clearly beside one word. Earrings. I scanned it, then tapped open my phone's voice recorder. "I'm not doing this to expose them," I said into the dark. "I'm doing this so I never forget who they really are." I wrapped the earrings in a separate cloth and slid them into the drawer, not to wear, not to display, just to remember. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern I had been taught to forgive. But that morning, something shifted. I woke before the sun had cleared the rooftops. The house was blanketed in that muffled stillness only gray Oregon mornings can bring. No birdsong, no voices, just mist and quiet. I didn't wait for coffee, didn't scroll, didn't check for messages. I walked to the closet and reached for the navy blazer I hadn't worn since Michael's memorial. The fabric felt stiffer than I remembered. I slipped it over a clean white button-down. The sleeves were looser now, but it still fit. In the mirror, I didn't look like someone with something to prove. I looked like someone who was done waiting. On my nightstand, the velvet cloth sat folded, careful and square, wrapped around the flash drive. Inside, receipts, scanned letters, Nana's will, the podcast audio, screenshots of Delaney's posts, and my own recorded voice. I slipped the cloth into a clear envelope, then sealed it inside a folio. No note, no text, I walked out the front door like I was heading to a routine checkup. No fire, no tension, just air and purpose. 15 minutes later, I parked outside a co-working space, tucked between a dog groomer and a yoga studio on the edge of downtown Eugene. The air smelled like rain and rosemary. The front desk manager, Ethan, soft-spoken, maybe 25, handed me a key card without asking questions. I appreciated that. I chose a table by the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. My laptop buzzed to life. I opened the legal document templates Michael's estate attorney had shared with me years ago, just in case. Now was the case. I filled in the details with measured precision. Item: 1 4.1 carat ring. Purchased jointly by Tessa Langley and Michael Rhodes 3 months prior to his death. Property held in trust until marriage. Ownership: in absence of marriage, defaults to surviving party, Tessa Langley. I cross-referenced every point. Dated emails, photo, timestamps. A notarized letter from Michael's mother confirming their intent for me to keep the ring. I added an affidavit describing the unauthorized sale and the emotional harm caused. At 10:42 a.m., I clicked send. The documents went straight to Samantha Mira at Fisher and Ellis LP, the lawyer who handled Michael's estate. Warm, but razor sharp. She'd know what to do. I didn't cry, didn't shake. I closed my laptop and leaned back in the chair, the soft patter of rain against glass smoothing the edges of everything. Across from me sat a ceramic cup of coffee. Cold now, but mine. That afternoon, I stayed. The team renting the next room was rehearsing for a nonprofit gala. Their laughter hummed through the walls. Like music I didn't expect, but somehow needed. Their laughter seeped through the walls like sunlight under a locked door. One of the women stepped out to take a call, caught my eye, and smiled. I nodded back. Then returned to my laptop and opened another folder. One that had nothing to do with Delaney or Jean or any of it. This one was mine. The Reclaiming What Was Always Yours initiative. An annual women's leadership gala I'd quietly been funding in Michael's memory since last fall. He used to say legacy didn't need a name, just a ripple, a light flicked on for someone else. That's what he believed in. The event would be held the following week at the Meadowbrook Center, just outside Eugene, an elegant venue with vaulted ceilings, soft lighting, and glass chandeliers. Every detail, from the wildflower centerpieces to the speaker stipends, had been handled under a quiet foundation I created. E.R. Trust. Everett Rhodes. His initials. His values. I reviewed the final PowerPoint slides. On the last one was a photo of us from years ago, volunteering at a career panel for single mothers. I remembered how he'd stayed late just to help a woman rework her resume by hand. That slide would close the night. At the bottom, in soft lettering, in honor of those who give quietly. I sent the deck to the event coordinator. Just as I packed up, my phone buzzed. A message from Jean. You got mail. Looks like a gala invite. Delaney got one too. I think they want her to speak. How wonderful. I stared at the screen. Then I laughed. Once. Quiet and dry, like the ending of a private joke. I didn't reply. Didn't RSVP. I didn't need to be on the stage. I'd already built the microphone. Let them bask in the spotlight. They had no idea who placed the bulbs. When I arrived just before sunset, the Meadowbrook Center glowed with floating candles and crystal bowls of white daisies. My touch. Jean would have picked roses, red, commanding. But this night wasn't hers to curate. I checked in at the front desk. No fanfare, no name tag. Just a soft touch on the elbow from the coordinator as she handed me a folded program. She didn't recognize me. That was perfect. Across the room, Delaney swept through the entrance in a white gown, hair pinned in sculpted waves. Jean walked beside her, whispering praise like she was crowning her at a pageant. You deserve this, darling, Jean said, just loud enough for anyone by the champagne table to hear. I stood quietly in a corner, not hiding, just unbothered. My black dress was plain, no sequins, no message to decode, just presence. My clutch stayed close to my ribs, the velvet cloth inside pressing against the sealed envelope I hadn't let out of sight in over a week. The music softened. The crowd's energy shifted. The evening host stepped up onto the small stage, her voice smooth as she welcomed everyone and thanked the sponsors. Polite applause rippled across the room. Dinner plates were cleared, wine refilled, candles flickered low. Then, and now, a surprise guest speaker. Delaney took the stage with a poised grace that almost passed for humility. Even her footsteps sounded choreographed. I imagined Jean just off to the side, chest swelling like a pageant coach. Grief, Delaney began, is a journey, but some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off. My fingers curled tightly around the clutch. Tonight, she continued, I want to talk about letting go, about not being defined by pain, but by what we do with it. She never said my name, but I was a shadow behind every sentence. I had to release what tethered me to the dark. Expectations, past wounds, even family conflict. Her voice dipped into a practiced ache. I chose light. The audience nodded along. Someone even murmured, like it was gospel. I moved calmly toward the event coordinator at the edge of the ballroom. She had one earbud in, eyes focused on her iPad screen. Excuse me, I said gently, handing her the envelope. This is a donor message. It was requested ahead. It should be played now, before the final speaker. She blinked. I wasn't told? There's a card inside. She opened it, scanned the handwriting, and her brows lifted slightly. Yes. Okay, I'll cue it up. I returned to my quiet corner. Delaney was still on stage, thanking the organizers, the city, the brave women who'd overcome so much. Applause swelled, then stilled. The house lights dimmed. The screen behind her flickered black. White text faded in memory of Michael Everett Rhodes. The room hushed. The video began. It was me, sitting in a simple room, facing the camera. My name is Tessa Langley. I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered, and I lost it. My voice filled the room. From the back, I watched heads turn. Some looked at me for the first time, not as a shadow in a black dress, but as someone they suddenly remembered seeing all evening. 2 years ago, I buried my fiancé. The image shifted on screen. Michael, smiling. Me beside him, hand in his. We picked out a ring together. It was a symbol of our future. It was taken, sold. The money went to fund someone else's journey, without my consent. I paused. No apology. Just truth. That ring didn't just represent a promise. It held grief, memory, love. Another photo appeared. Michael at a community event, passing out backpacks to single mothers, my hand resting gently on his shoulder. I funded this gala quietly in his name. The theme, reclaiming what was always yours, wasn't just about leadership. It was about memory and truth. No anger in my voice, just the calm ache of clarity. Sometimes, I said as the final slide appeared, the ones who suffer most are expected to stay silent so the loudest can heal. The screen faded to black. No applause, no gasp. Just silence thick enough to drown in. Jean's hand flew to her mouth like she'd been slapped. Delaney, still standing on stage, frozen mid-pose, caught between rehearsed grace and raw disbelief. A flash went off. The photographer caught her mid-expression, eyebrows high, mouth parted. Half fear, half confusion. I didn't wait. As I turned to leave, someone behind me whispered, "She paid for this." Then another, softer still. That was her fiancé? I didn't stop, didn't soak in vindication. I just stepped into the chilled night air. I wasn't invisible. I just wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't need applause. I needed the truth to ring in a room that couldn't look away. The next morning, my phone vibrated nonstop. Before I even opened my eyes, it buzzed on the nightstand like a warning shot. 38 unread messages, 12 missed calls. My Instagram was flooded. Digital ash from the fire I'd quietly lit. I tapped Delaney's story. She was crying, flawlessly. "I was ambushed," she sobbed, Last night was meant to celebrate healing, not be twisted by revenge. Next slide. She's weaponizing grief. A clip of her dabbing her eyes with trembling, manicured fingers. Then another. She turned slightly, thinking the camera had cut. I tried to include her. But sometimes, family is the real enemy. The comments poured in. Wow, this is so sad. She needs help. Your sister sounds toxic. That's what the comments looked like. Line after line. Cold sympathy for Delaney, sharp judgment for me. By the time I opened Twitter, 2 local blogs had already picked up her version of events. Resilience coach faces family sabotage at women's gala. It was fast, calculated, polished like it had been ready before the night even began. A text came in from Jean. You've broken this family apart. Are you happy now? Followed by a missed call from Richard, my father. No voicemail, just silence loud enough to echo. I blocked them both. Then came a message from Ethan, the co-working space manager who'd handed me the key card without a word. He'd known Michael, known me too from years ago, before I got used to shrinking to fit the space people gave me. Don't let them own the final word, he wrote. You've come too far to be pushed back into the dark. That was enough to get me out of bed. I threw on jeans, a navy sweater, no makeup, no earrings, just the velvet cloth folded into my jacket pocket, and a transcript I printed that morning. The kind of truth you don't scream, but refuse to bury. The drive to my parents' house took 10 minutes. My hands knew the turns, even if my heart didn't. The front door was open, like it had expected me. Inside, Delaney was pacing, phone in hand, hair twisted into a messy knot. Her voice came in stilted rehearsals. Something about emotional boundaries. Something about my healing story. She froze when she saw me. You shouldn't be here, she snapped, but her hands trembled slightly. I won't be long, I said, calm as ocean glass. I stepped into the living room and set the transcript on the coffee table. Thin paper, heavy presence. Her eyes flinched toward it. What is that? I didn't answer right away. I gently unfolded the velvet cloth, empty now, a soft square of memory. I placed it beneath the transcript. It's your voice, I said quietly. From the podcast, where you called me a grief addict. Her face went pale. You don't understand how media works. Number? But I understand how truth works. She stared, lips parted, silent. Then I turned. Jean stood in the hallway, wide-eyed. Like she just realized this wasn't my reckoning. It was theirs. We're family, Tessa, Jean said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Blood. I stopped. Not out of hesitation, but out of clarity. Blood means nothing without respect. My voice didn't shake. I'm not here to belong anymore. I'm here to break the cycle. She didn't respond. Just stood there like someone who'd lost her place in a well-rehearsed script. I walked past her and stepped into the crisp morning. The sky had begun to open, just a narrow streak of light between clouds. The kind of light you have to look for. I slipped the velvet cloth back into my pocket. It felt different now. Clean. Finished. I hadn't walked away because I hated them. I walked away because, for the first time, I loved myself more. The morning light in Napa was softer. Not sharp, not accusing. It didn't pierce. It warmed. A breeze swept gently through the vineyards as I turned the key in the lock of my new studio. Above the door, gold lettering shimmered against deep wood grain. Langford and Rhodes, a name crafted from memory. I stepped inside and flicked on the lights. The space wasn't large, but it felt like it had room to breathe. Like I did. Polished wood floors, brass fixtures, work tables facing windows that framed the hills like painted stillness. The walls were warm cream, and my tools sat in quiet readiness. Tumblers, molds, flame torch, pliers. I hadn't realized how much I missed the scent of warmed metal. It smelled like purpose. That first week, people came. A couple from San Francisco wandered in, looking for wedding bands with soul. A woman in her 70s asked if I could turn a locket into a ring to carry her husband's photo, not just in memory. And then came the quiet ones, locals who barely spoke but looked around with knowing eyes. You're the one from the gala, right? I'd nod, smile, Nothing more? In the back corner, under soft lighting, sat a glass case. Inside, folded precisely, was the velvet cloth. Beneath it, framed in script, "This piece is not for sale." It cost everything to make. Resting below was a single band. Diamond and steel, seamless, etched into its edge. One delicate daisy. Not ornamental, not flashy, just steady, certain. One afternoon, a little girl pressed her nose to the glass. "Who made that one?" she asked. I crouched beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "I did," I said, "but it made me too." "Someone who used to be silent," I said. The little girl turned to me, brows furrowed in curiosity. "Is she better now?" I smiled, gently, honestly. "She's still learning, but she's not silent anymore." Weeks passed. Not a word from Jean or Delaney, no calls, no texts, but silence sometimes is its own answer. Then one Saturday, a message arrived from Lorraine, an old family friend I hadn't spoken to since college. "Saw your tribute at the gala. Your mom never said anything, but she kept the video on her desktop." I read it twice. Let it rest. Didn't respond. Didn't forward it. Just let it be. Sometimes apologies don't come with words, and that doesn't mean you spend your life waiting to hear them. I walked to the workbench and slid open the top drawer. Inside, the original receipt for the velvet box, corners yellowed with time. Next to it, Michael's final note, the one I'd kept tucked in my wallet like a lifeline. "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." Outside, sunlight spilled over the cobblestones. I stepped out front, breathed in deep, and flipped the sign to open. As the day unfolded, I melted silver, set stones, sketched a new line of pendants. But there was no rush, no desperation, just motion. Steady. Mine. From the back of the studio, a folk song played. Soft, crackling like vinyl. I didn't know the lyrics, but the melody felt like something I'd once known, before I had words for knowing. I glanced again at the cloth under the glass. Once, it held a symbol of a future that vanished. Now, it held nothing. And somehow, that meant everything. I lost something meant to last forever. Then I lost people who weren't. But through it all, I found something quieter, stronger, myself. And this time, no one gets to sell me. If you've ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, just to finally hear your own voice, then I hope my story speaks to you. Leave me a comment if you've been through something similar, or if you just want to say, "I see you." Your words matter more than you know. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't owe your peace to anyone who breaks it. Reclaim what was always yours. Your worth, your truth, your power. I did. And I promise you can too.